mobility, and that being such a strong next phase in using ed tech or learning technology, as Andrew has now coined our new phrase, learning technology. We're gonna get into that now with our next panel. It's Rise of the Mobile Connected Campus, and our moderator today is John Ittelson. He's a professor at CSU in Monterey Bay, among many other things. So I will turn it over to you, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. That's pretty good. You can do a little bit better. Come on. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, good. I can now say that I need to do a correction. I'm actually a professor emeritus. That's the best part of that is you get a free parking pass and don't go to faculty meetings. Had I known that, I would have become emeritus earlier. We'd like to do a little check here. Earlier in the day, we asked how many people were in higher ed. So can we get that hands up? Higher ed, okay. How many sort of K-12 oriented? Okay, that's good. How many of you have a mobile device? Good, okay. And how many of you have children that are in either K-12? Okay, so the experts are among you, and we have experts up here on the panel. So we're going to be looking at mobility and the move of this technology into the K-12 space. And we couldn't have a better panel. The colleagues here, a number of them are old friends and some new friends. I'm going to let them each do a brief introduction so you know a little bit about them and what they're doing, and then we're going to start a dialogue, and then we'll open up the questions to you after we've had a chance to fight among ourselves. So Mike, do you want to start?
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So I'm going to take a half hour. So I've got many jobs. I'm Mike Guerena. I'm the president of ThinkWrite and also the director of instructional technology for the Encinitas Union School District in California. We're in our fourth year of one-to-one district-wide implementation. Hopefully talk a little about that. And my company develops mobile device accessories for the classroom, specifically for mobile learning environments.
And the fun thing about Mike is he's in the field practicing at a district,
yep.
But an entrepreneur spirit, which is pretty critical if you're going to be in this space.
I can't answer my own phone calls anymore. So.
I'm Kristin Townsend with the Verizon's Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Verizon. Earlier today, Mr. Levin spoke about how important it is for us to invest in education. If you invest, you will see a return. That's really what drives what we do. We see a great opportunity in solving society's problems through investments in our societies. And so our investments tend to be, they come out of the Foundation's education department, and we focus a lot on helping districts, schools, administrators, teachers, and students in their communities understand how they can really significantly leverage the technology that's in their pockets, in their backpacks, already in hand, so that they can help students become more interested, invested themselves in their education, and ultimately to be more successful.
And the Verizon Foundation has really had a strong presence in education. We met
Right.
back in the days Marco Polo, which then became ThinkFinity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been interesting. One of the fun things for me is to see a foundation who has been consistently supporting education. And
Yes.
we'll talk a little bit more about that and supporting education to our superintendent.
All right, good morning. I'm Devin. I'm superintendent of Vista Unified School District. Vista Unified is in North San Diego County. Mike's kids actually go to school in Vista, so we're all connected in interesting ways. I've been superintendent for, this is my third year, and kind of interesting background. Both my parents worked in technology fields and then migrated into teaching. And so I was thinking about mobile technology this morning. The first mobile device I remember was the Osborne computer. Does anybody here remember that? It was just massive, right? Unlimited potential, massive. So Vista Unified, we have about 22,000 students. 2/3 of our students are on free and reduced lunch, and about 1/3 are English learners. Within the district, we have a lot of variety. Some areas in the district feel like they're very rural. We have a high migrant farm worker population in some areas. Other parts of the town are very suburban, upper middle class, tract homes, and then other parts are high density apartments, almost an urban feel. So our district's very representative of the diversity of California and of our nation as a whole, and happy to be here.
And not to be too California-centric, California is not only a state, but a country and a state of mind. But the U.S. is sort of a third world entity when it comes to mobility in some measures.
Yep.
And so luckily we have Brian who gives us a real international perspective.
So I'm happy to be here. I'm Brian OliverSmith. I'm the CEO and co-founder of company Urban Planet Mobile. Urban Planet Mobile is the first recipient of the best mobile learning solution by the GSMA a number of years ago in Barcelona, and a Gartner Award winner and Frost & Sullivan Award winner for mobile learning. Our model's slightly different. We're about 95% international, and we go through the mobile carriers. So we deliver education solutions in countries such as Myanmar, Malaysia, Indonesia, and then we move on to places like Iraq and Jordan, Saudi Arabia. We also now are in about 8 countries in Africa, from Rwanda to places like Uganda, where we did mobile literacy, and then Central America, where we have a strong partnership with Tigo, Claro, Movistar. And we basically work with the mobile operators because off of the United States, 85% of the users are prepaid, and the mobile operators have a very strong relationship. And we work and deliver programs. Our leading program is called Urban English, which is in about 35 countries. We also then do mobile literacy in Africa. We're launching Mobile Baby in Colombia, which is all about education for young moms. And then we have a writing product that is not on mobile phones, but called Writing Planet for English language learners. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, so you can see we have a very diverse panel, but I want to start with you, Doctor. Do your faculty and students know you're here in Vegas gambling?
Well, I'm pretty active on social media, and I've been posting on Twitter all day, so they do know that I'm in Las Vegas, but gambling, maybe not.
Well, the gambling may be the leap that your district took in terms of dealing with the digital promise and mobile. Why don't you
Sure.
enlighten us a little bit about what you're doing at your district?
Right. So when I came to our school district, one of the first big tasks that I took on was thinking forward to what's our vision, what's our mission, what are our values. And we went through a really participative process and ended up with a vision that we wanted our school district to be the model of educational excellence and innovation. And I tell people all the time that just about every school district wants to be excellent. You'll see that in vision or mission statements all over the place, but very few districts actually set out to be innovative. And I remember as a superintendent, a new superintendent at the time, that was a frightening prospect. As much as I like innovation, innovation requires a degree of risk. So when you talk about gambling, I do understand that analogy. But since we set out to be the models of innovation, we've done a lot of things as a school district trying to transform what we're doing. And we were so fortunate in the spring of last year, we were approached by Digital Promise, which is a national nonprofit that was spun off by Congress. And they told us that the Verizon Foundation was looking for some schools across the country where they would be able to provide 24/7 connectivity built into devices at some middle schools. And they asked if we were interested in participating. We said, yes, it sounds like a great opportunity. We were hopeful to get one of the schools out of the 8, and it turned out that 2 of our schools, one of them is Vista, the Vista Innovation Design Academy, and our principal, Dr. Shigela's in the back. Thanks for being here, Eric. The other one is Rancho Minerva Middle School. These are 2 of our higher poverty middle schools. At Rancho Minerva Middle, for example, 90% of the families had no connectivity at all at home. And so this, over the summer, we worked through the implementation plans, and in the fall, every student at each of those 2 schools received an iPad with the built-in connectivity. They take it with them. All of their learning is built into the device, if you will. And it's the first time in my educational experience that we've actually not only gone to one-to-one, which you see in quite a few schools, but that round-the-clock connectivity so that learning can be extended outside of schools for every single student. So it's been an exciting journey.
1-to-1, 7x24 in the classroom, in the home. So Verizon helped make this happen. So what's Verizon's interest in doing it, and how did you find this school?
Oh, excellent question. So a year ago, February, is when the president announced the Connected Initiative, and 10 companies came forward with $100 million or more commitments to education. The project that was mentioned is part of that connected commitment.
The
It's
digital
Verizon's-
promise.
So part of it was to invest in this innovative learning school program. The digital promise would help us to formulate and get the devices out.
Let's do a quick poll of the
Yep.
audience. How many of you are familiar with the digital promise? Not as many, so you might want to explain a
Right,
little
so
bit more
digital
about
promise, as Devin mentioned, is, was appointed by, or authorized by Congress. And it is currently, it's a nonprofit. Their focus is on the intersections of research, innovation, entrepreneurship, and education, and how all of those pieces come together to improve the digital learning that's going on inside of our classrooms. It's being led by Karen Cater, who was the head of educational technology at the Department of Education before heading up Digital Promise.
it. I think this is one of the, it's sort of sad that there were so few people who knew about it. But then,
Right.
you know, it is something that the Congress actually did last year.
Yeah.
Which there's not a lot of those
One of
things.
two. Well, the other one was shutting it down, so.
Yeah, yeah. So, so we asked Digital Promise if they would help us identify the schools that Devin mentioned, 8 schools across the country, in order to outfit the schools with technology, tablets for all of the students in each of the 8 middle schools, and all of the tablets have 2 years worth of 5 gig per month internet access. So that we're not just providing devices, and as we've all mentioned, there are a lot of places that have gone 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, but we're giving students an opportunity to all be on the same playing field. It no longer matters if a student comes in and then goes home to their FiOS network and continues their learning on Blackboard or Edmodo or whatever, or a student goes home and has to go sit outside of a McDonald's to get access to the internet to finish their work. Or have to use that prepaid data plan on a smartphone to get their work done, to upload a document to Google. There's no question about whether or not they have access, because it's now available to them 24/7, and that's one of the most, the fact that we've eradicated the digital divide, we've eliminated any stigma or opportunity completely, is what's so powerful to us.
So you have more schools than the 2 in California. Where are your
Correct.
other schools?
We have 2 schools outside of Chicago, 2 schools outside of Philadelphia, and 2 schools in the Raleigh area. All of them serve high poverty districts. The average free and reduced lunch rate is over 70% across all 8 schools.
Mike, I assume if you're going to do something like this, because you're involved in putting machines in the hands of students, what are some of the challenges connected with that?
Let me take out my list. There are a lot of challenges, and I think the number one thing for us as a district, actually almost 5 years ago when we started this journey, was learning. You know, you have to start with learning goals. We didn't start with an iPad and say, how can we make this something that we can learn with? So when we went through our learning goals, deciding what types of learning we wanted to do, knowing that technology can provide feedback, provide teachers data, can scaffold creative applications for our kids, all of that kind of led us at the time to the iPad being the best device. So, you know, now that every student in my district, K to 6, has an iPad, you know, right now one of our big challenges is a technical challenge. We're having issues with a little bit of wireless issues, some issues with 1 or 2 of our digital content providers. So, you know, all our curriculum is now digital. We don't have textbooks anymore. But when there's technical issues with that, it freaks out teachers. And so you have to deal with that right away, because what happens is they invest a lot in themselves to change their paradigm, to change the way they've been teaching for a long time, and they're now relying on the technology. And so you have to make sure that 100% that technology is working. And if there's issues, then it becomes like you lose instructional time. So, you know, so that's a minor issue because it's a one segment of our program. Of course, our upper grade kids fix everything, so that's not a big deal. So, in fact, our kindergartners are starting to fix everything. But the nice thing is for us, once you get the technology out, you're no longer spending time looking at technology. Once you have the curriculum in place, you're no longer evaluating curriculum. So for the last 2 years, we've been going, it's about depth. It's about everyone having the resources now, doing professional development, learning how these tools can transform the classroom, getting our teachers to talk less in the classroom, getting our learning more personalized. And so my role is, I'm not IT, I'm educational technology. So my focus is all the learning that happens in the classroom. And so we've gotten, every teacher and every classroom has made a lot of progress. Some not as much as others, but when you walk in and see students engaged, you see the students knowing that what they're getting feedback on. Seeing kids that have never played an instrument before now composing music on GarageBand, things like that. It's pretty incredible to see that. And I'll kind of end with this. The other day we were talking with some teachers, and I had a teacher that said, every morning I look at the data from the work they did the day before, and I can now restructure my classroom. Instead of having my lesson plan designed out for the week, I now have it individualized and modified so that I know what to hit. I know what my kids are learning. I know if they all got it, I'm not going to spend much time on it. I know if these 6 kids didn't get it, I can pull them aside. I can have these guys working on a project or working a little bit more depth. So getting the devices out there, has its challenges. You find some technical challenges, but for us, there's no going back. We're not going to take them away and give them back. So we have to problem solve if there's anything that comes up, because we know we're on that path and we can't go back.
I'm going to want to follow up with both of you about the teachers, and you said the teachers going a little further along than others, but,
Yep.
but you also mentioned about some of the technical issues and conductivity. Brian, with you indicate that you really have a strong relationship with the providers. Most of your stuff is done outside of schools, in the home and non-classroom settings?
So we have 2 different product lines. Our mobile products are all done outside the classroom. Urban English, our mobile literacy that we did in Uganda with a few thousand mothers, was all done using the mobile networks. And our philosophy is pretty much going back to the Greeks, where learning is absolutely social, but it's not tied to a place. So, as Socrates would wander around and have his students lecture and follow, he was certainly mobile, and he was certainly on his way, and it wasn't tied to a structure. It was tied to, we have a very firm belief that learning is both social and personal. So we have the personal products, which is the Urban English that reaches a mobile device, and we're very proud of the fact that it reaches any mobile device in the world. So there's 7 billion, and you can get Urban English on a $50 Nokia in Myanmar, and you can get it on a smartphone anywhere you like. And we have to work with the carriers because, brilliantly, as Verizon just did, they're the ones who solved that problem of connectivity. Our other product that we have, which is called Writing Planet, goes over the web browsers, and that is in school settings from Monterey Technical University in Mexico to schools in Pakistan. In fact, we just sponsored for the 2nd year in a row a national writing competition, first time ever in the country of Pakistan. And we had 4,000 students submit essays. So for us, we take a little bit of a different approach than the U.S. districts, which is what they need to do. They need to work on control and making sure the equality. We don't work on control. We work on the idea that it's going to be uneven, and we can't solve that. We can't solve what kind of data plan someone's on. We can't solve what device they carry. So what we have to do is make sure our product is in as many formats as possible to work on as many devices as possible, and then we focus more on strategy. So it's a bit of a different model in that sense.
The panel before us was talking about big data and analytics. Do you have good data of your use worldwide?
We do have good data of our use worldwide. We consider Urban English to not do very well if it doesn't hit over 10,000 students within the first 60 days. So when we launched in Iraq, we had 30,000 students within, and just prior to the ISIS chaos, within about 40 days, we had 30,000 students. So we also look at education where we take the best that we can find in the United States, and if we can innovate it for an international market, we see that a lot of times the United States is leading in certain technology and certain education practices, but there are other places as well, like Singapore is amazing right now, what they're doing in digital. They're a leader in Asia, and so we look at that. And what we do is basically trying to take the best practice, but I think of education a little bit differently internationally. I think of it the way we look at water. So I have a nice bottle of water. And so the reality is In the United States, we're not just dealing with water as education. We're putting vitamins into it. We're doing adaptive programs. We're doing, what else can we do? We're putting coloring into it. And then you go to the 7-Eleven and there's, 7 shelves of different styles of water. Internationally, they're needing education. They just need education. There's 250 million kids that are not in any formal education situation right now, or they're in garage schools. And our goal is, how do we take the technology that we have that's the most scalable in the world, which is mobile, and look for new models to reach those kids? So we want to use technology as you are, because we want to see that's going to be the future, but we also want to drive technology to look for new models to provide, because those kids, they're not going to go to school in the next 3 years, but they will get a mobile phone. So we have to drive that.
It is great, sort of, you take a lot from the best of the U.S. and then spread it around the world, but it sounds like you're learning a lot that could be coming back to us, because some of our students may not be going to school even though they're physically there for the next 3 years.
And we did a project with Durham Public Schools where we did our SAT Remix, which is an SAT study vocabulary every day by audio, so you can listen to it as well. It's got some great beats. We love that product. And we gave it to all of the juniors in Durham Public Schools and did a study to show they cause improvements. It was very interesting because originally Dr. B. Coates and I had designed it to be just in 2 schools. And we started doing parents' meetings. And so many of the parents said, well, what about my son or daughter in this other school? And we stopped all conversation about, do they have a mobile phone? Do they not? If you're studying for the SAT and you don't have a mobile phone, you have bigger problems in life than, that I can solve. So we didn't worry about, do you have a phone? Do you have connectivity? We worried that suddenly we gave it to all juniors because there's such a hunger. So I think you're going to see that as well. In the mobile world, there's a lot more being done internationally for mobile learning that will come back this way. In the digital world and the digital practices and the adaptive learning and the structures with schools, it's going to be going the other way. It's back and forth.
One of the fun studies on mobile phone learning was done in New Zealand. And one of the success rates there is the students said it's really great because when I'm waiting for the bus, they don't know whether I'm texting a friend or studying math.
Mm-hmm.
So you've mentioned you've been in the trenches with your one-to-one for 2 years. You've been in the trenches with your one-to-one for how long?
Well, 6 months with the devices that have the built-in connectivity, but many years of experience with devices that within the school environment
Within
are
the school.
connected.
So how did you bring the faculty along, the students along, and the parents along? I assume it was different for each segment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually want to touch a little bit on just risk first, because
Okay.
one of it relates to how to help people to understand why we need to do this. And one of the questions that people would ask when we'd say, we're going to give these kids an iPad or we're going to give them a Chromebook or whatever the device is what if the student loses it? What if they break it? What if it's stolen? All of those kinds of worries. And those are legitimate, and there are ways to be proactive about some of those. But I always like to ask the question, well, what are the risks if we don't do this? And I hear the stories about Singapore, and I hear that, you just see what's happening around us. And if we don't do something, our students are going to be at a disadvantage. And I think looking at it from that perspective really helps people who are reluctant to embrace something new to realize that we're at a stage where we don't have much of a choice. This is the way that things are moving. Learning experiences can be extended and enriched and enhanced through the connectivity provided by these digital learning experiences. And other students are going to have that experience. So if our students don't, are we really doing what's right for them? So, and it's been surprising how people have really embraced in our environment these new tools. The students, you never have to sell on it. They just are excited about just about everything. And so that's the easiest in terms of generating enthusiasm. The parents in our environment, when we did the iPad deployments, there were parents weeping who said that they felt like this showed that the school district respected and valued their child. And these are the 2 schools that are participating, high poverty schools, and we did a voluntary insurance program, and almost 80% of the families participated in the voluntary insurance program, families that don't have a lot of resources. That indicates, the kind of value they put on it. And then with staff at Eric's school, we actually gave the staff the option to leave. Said if you want to go to another school in the district, you can. And they didn't. They stayed. And I think some of it is them feeling like they had a choice in it, but even some of the teachers that had a very traditional stand and deliver approach have really transformed their instruction much faster than I would have expected. But a lot of it also has to do with support, and we didn't mention this earlier, but the Verizon Foundation is also paying for us to have coaches at the schools. So if a teacher has a question about how do I use this instructionally, they don't have to wait for a workshop. There's someone on their campus that's available all the time. And that high level of peer support, I think, is important on the teacher side.
Peer support and professional development,
Absolutely.
which Verizon's been strong in for a long time. You want to talk about your?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, like you said, been back even when we were, MCI, WorldCom. It goes back really far. We've always known that.
They didn't enforce child labor laws when
Yes.
they were there, so.
We've always invested in professional development, and we've always known that that's the key to any of the success of anything, really, inside of the classrooms. And so, in Devin's, the two schools in Devin's district, there are, as you mentioned, full-time coaches, where their role is to be an instructional coach, a learning coach to their teachers. And then there's constant ongoing professional development. There are full-day workshops with the teachers. There are smaller things that happen, afternoons. I know a lot of groups that are formed. And there are two beautiful things that are happening. First, because of all of this time that we've spent, Verizon and its predecessor companies have spent in professional development for teachers. I've been to a lot of professional development sessions. Even when I was teaching, I sat through a lot of professional development, mostly every August. And there's always, it's probably the same at any team meeting, there are always the people who are upset that they're there, who find that not valuable to them, they want to know why they have to be there. I can honestly say that in the 8 sessions we did this August at the 8 different schools, everyone, from the PE teacher to the instructional technology person who is already designated, everyone has bought in. And the second beautiful thing that I think leads to that is that just as we personalize learning for students, and the last session talked about that, we're personalizing learning for the teachers. The expectation is not that the teacher who has been using the real projector to show videos in their music class will suddenly have their students orchestrating full compositions on an iPad. The expectation is not that in 6 months everyone will be doing that. The expectation is that everyone will progress and everyone will learn and further themselves. And because we've set that as the expectation, that teachers have to identify where they want to go, and then our coaches and the Digital Promise team will help them get there, I think that's changed the entire program, the outcomes, is that everyone feels like they're being heard, they're able to progress, but they're not expected to become the valedictorian of mobile learning.
So you're early on. I'd like to hear, what you see as anecdotal evidence of what's happening, and then Mike, we'll come to you because you've been in the trenches with yours a little longer. So in your first 6 months, what have you seen that you think is giving you hope or making you lose hair at night?
I'll tell a quick funny story, and then I'll get into hope. There are a lot of surprises along the way. The one thing, I don't know, Mike, if you've had this, but I got a call one day from one of our principals, and they said, we have an interesting situation. We didn't expect this. What should we do about it? I said, well, what happened? They said, well, the kid's parent took the iPad to work, and the kid doesn't have the device, and what do we do about it? So, those are the kinds of surprises that you run into, good surprises. But some really encouraging things have happened in the early going. I think the biggest, most tangible thing, if you get the chance to just feel it, is these are schools that had histories of a lot of violence among the students, a lot of discipline problems, a lot of just unrest on these campuses, gang issues, and the student discipline has gone to zero, just overnight. And I've heard that story from other places that have gone to this, one-to-one kind of connected approach. But when you see it, when you feel it, it's unbelievable. When Kristin came to visit, and I described what the culture of the schools had been previously, it was hard for her to imagine it because it's so obvious, that transformation. So we have great data in terms of student engagement, student discipline, that I think is absolutely encouraging. Some of our internal measures, local benchmarks, also very encouraging in terms of the progress we're seeing from students. But we're also seeing that more and more families want to go to these schools. And so the demand from parents is elevated. And so I think it's only been a short time, but we're seeing a lot of signs that make me feel really optimistic about the future.
So you're in the honeymoon period. Mike, what's it like after the honeymoon?
Well, actually, it's like a typical marriage. A lot of hard work. So this is our 4th year, so we have 3 years of data that we've gotten from surveys from parents, teachers, and students. And it always gives us really interesting information. So, for example, for students, as you would imagine, about over 90% said that having the iPad has made learning easier for them. 85% it's personalized learning more for them. What's interesting though is that so when you go into a digital program, some people expect you're just going to throw everything else out. So you're going to clean the whole school of paper. And really, the paperless classroom is really not a reality for most. From a personal perspective, if I have to write on a piece of paper once every 6 months, that's probably about average for me. But for our teachers who are making the transition, it's a little different. So I like to call it less paper, not paperless. Because let's find ways to reduce the amount of paper we're using without having to put the pressure of you can't use paper on them. And so when we survey our students, it's interesting because we ask them what would they do they prefer using paper or iPad or neither or on some stuff. And some stuff you would imagine. So for reading a book, what do you guys think? How many guys think that they chose the iPad for reading a book was their preference as a digital experience? How many guys think paper-based book, like you reading a novel, or, okay, how many guys think they didn't really care, it was one way or the other? Okay, so
A lot of people didn't vote at all here.
I know, they were scared. 54% of the kids prefer a paper-based experience on a book. 35% said they preferred it on the iPad, and about 11 were not sure. A lot of that has to do with the access to books too. If anyone's here from the publishing industry, let's talk afterwards. We need more of a Netflix approach than a pay per pupil approach. But if you break down the data and look at the teachers that are really using digital text the way they should, embedding questions, letting the kids take notes, being able to analyze what they're reading, doing close reading, which is really important for Common Core, you see that those kids go at higher levels of digital because of the usage. And so if you filter that. But some of the other stuff like drawing, much higher on paper still. Again, based on experience. Presentations, 80+%. But the interesting one was completing math experience or math practice. So last year we rolled out our digital curriculum tools. We worked with a company called 10 Marks, who was bought recently by Amazon, and we also work with a company called ST Math, which does a lot of conceptual math. And so last year it was about 54% said they preferred doing it, but it was also the first year of adoption, so a lot of our teachers weren't using it as much last year. I would say this year we'll probably see it closer to 80%. Kids like getting feedback. They like knowing that when they respond to something that they got it correct or not, whereas 10 Marks is more of a traditional. They'll have to respond to a problem. At the end, they actually get a chance to go back. It tells them their score. They go back and they can recorrect it, and if they are under 70%, it gives them something called an amplifier to redo it, whereas ST Math is very game-orientated, and it's all about mastery. You can't get through the concepts of fractions, all game-based, until you complete at 100%. And so the students are seeing different ways of getting feedback, but so moving to that was one of our number one priorities. But a lot of the programs are still getting there, and that's one of the challenges is that there's a lot of different levels of quality, and you used to get everything through a McGraw-Hill or a Houghton Mifflin, and now you're seeing these startups that are coming into the field. One of the challenges is how have they vetted their curriculum.
And Brian, you had to find stuff, so where do you find?
So it's interesting, for the mobile devices, And when I think of mobile internationally, I don't think of the device. I think of how it's being delivered, which is an important, if you develop educational content, please hear this point. This is a major one. If you want to go international, you have to develop the content differently than going through a fat Wi-Fi pipe here in the United States.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of really great development of bringing high fiber networks and broadband and heavy Wi-Fi into various schools, especially in the urban schools. And so there's some really great programs that are developed for that. Those don't fly internationally. They won't work because what's going to happen is internationally, the internet penetration is all going to be via the mobile networks. So it doesn't matter what device is at the end that I'm using. Is it, is it a phone? Is it a feature phone? Is it a tablet? Is it an Android tablet? Is it a computer? It doesn't matter. The data is going to come across those mobile networks. So please develop in chunks. So we started by developing our own content. So the Urban English, which has won so many awards, has won those awards because we developed it all from scratch for the mobile device. I mean, these are everything from basic ringtones that play for a minute and a half that can work anywhere in the world so we had to develop that because nobody had it. We talked to Pearson, talked to Berlitz, talked to everyone, we developed that. And so we've developed most of our content with experts, experts in technology, but mostly experts in English language learning and education. And we're at an interesting phase now where we're merging our company with Blended Schools Networks. And Blended Schools Networks has had over 2 million students in the United States use their proven content. They have a couple hundred amazing courses, and they've got it, but they developed it in chunks, which allows me to bring it and take it over mobile networks. So, and that's one of the reasons we're putting these together is I've got people around the world wanting other content, professional development. So we've reached a stage because of our distribution, our size, that we need, as you say, vetted content that's proven, that's award-winning, that is high quality, and we want to bring that to the world. So we're still developing our own programs. We just finished a program called 333 Words, which is multi-platform and now also going to be on Firefox. So we're going to do both. We're aggressively going to do both. And if you have something for us, come talk to me because the world needs it.
I think device agnostic is it's got to be. I mean, even though we run on iPads, everything we go with has to be device agnostic, has to be accessible through what they would potentially use at home. Our 3rd through 6th graders take the iPads home. Our K through 2 students generally don't. We have some 2nd grades that do. So we need to ensure that when they go home, they can have the same access to the curriculum, etc. And for our students that don't have access at home, we work with Cox on providing $10 a month internet subsidies. A lot of our students can get access in some way, whether it's at McDonald's or the neighbor or something, that they seem to be able to get access. And then some of our teachers kind of flip it so that they send projects home with kids that they can do offline using some of the tools on the iPad itself. So there's different ways to be able to do a program without having to have 100% Wi-Fi. I mean, optimally having a connection at all times, but that gets expensive. I don't think the model's been developed yet really universally that we can do it hopefully with E-rate and things like that, modifications that will help out.
Sorry to jump in, but I do think this is an area where we're going to need help.
Yeah.
Which is, from a school district perspective, we can put Wi-Fi into the schools and we can have abundant access when kids are on our campuses. But this is a whole new frontier when we're talking about how do you ensure that kids have connectivity outside of the school. And if it wasn't for partners like Cox, Verizon, that we just wouldn't have the capability to do this. And yet, while a lot of kids are industrious and they find ways to get connections, there's an equity issue for those students that can't get that access compared to those who do. If as a society we want to give every student an equal chance to succeed, we have to work together to come up with ways to ensure that connectivity is available. Yeah, and I don't know, I've talked to people at the FCC about changes, and there's a lot of apprehension about using things like E-rate for home connectivity. I'll say, well, what's the concern? And they'll say, well, we don't want to find out that people are paying tax subsidies for someone to be watching Netflix at home. It has to be
Yep.
it has to be geared towards a learning outcome for the students. And so I think we're all going to need to think about this in different ways and come up with some creative and innovative approaches.
Yeah, I think you've really
Well,
brought
and I think it goes back to your, what if we don't?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if we don't, though?
And it takes innovative, and just like Verizon, it takes, in this subject exactly, it takes innovative public-private partnerships.
Yep.
And you have to do that. Internationally, they can't worry about, are we going to provide everyone the same? So they basically are doing innovative approaches. So in Guatemala, people don't pay for data when they get our education, our urban English, because the mobile carrier Tigo is whitelisted so that they don't get charged data. If they go to M schools, they don't get any data. So they pay a little bit of a subscription, but they don't have to pay extra data, because in the meeting when they were going to do this, I said, I won't launch the product. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I'll go across the street and we'll talk to Claro. I'm not launching the product because it'll make it cost prohibitive. The few dollars a month that it takes the student to learn English will go to you also for data. It'll triple the cost. I won't launch the product. And they, and now they whitelist all of our programs with M schools. So it takes that kind of innovative, partnership. Guayaquil, for instance, in Ecuador, is doing a city Wi-Fi. They're putting the infrastructure for Wi-Fi for the whole city, but they have to limit it. They're limited to a half hour, but it gives a half hour every citizen. So again, public-private innovation is what it's going to take in that area.
Yep. And there's 1,000 school districts in California alone, and Vista and Sanitas are on the cutting edge, but a lot of districts are a couple years down the road, and I think it takes also providing best practices and support. I mean, that's one of the reasons I started ThinkWrite, was to be able to share some of what we've done, and maybe to reduce the timeline and what they're doing. But there's small communities out there that, even if we have these partnerships, they have to be remembered, because a lot of times these partnerships happen in larger places, more influential districts, even with high poverty. But LAUSD is going to get more attention than a district up in Northern California with a low high poverty rate that's rural.
In California, we have the K-12 high-speed network, which goes to the 58 district offices, but then there's a big gap between the district offices. And
Most have connectivity at schools. I was always surprised, even a couple years ago, looking to see what type of connectivity. But so I think the schools have the connectivity for the most part.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've had, through Digital Promise, the ability to visit some schools across the country, and was at the White House not long ago for the Connected event with President Obama. And I was shocked when I heard from colleagues in other states the kind of connectivity that they have at the moment, which often is like your home connectivity going into the school office.
Yep.
And but you have hundreds of users trying to get it. So as a country, that's why the president is saying we need to really think about ensuring every classroom has high-speed internet access. And I would take it a step further and say every kid needs it around the clock, whether they're in school or not.
But that's why school needs to slow down on always being a place.
Right.
It needs to be a society of learning that has personalized learning and is social, because maybe that place is a work environment that isn't being used in the afternoon and they have great Wi-Fi. But I'll tell you, it's a fraction of a price for Verizon to drop in another cell tower than to lay all these pipes and to dig it all up. Mobility is not about the device. Mobility is about taking it over the mobile networks. So it's not just me. It's Jared Cohen and Eric Schmidt in The Digital Life. They said it perfectly. In the first chapter, they said there's about 7 billion mobile phones right now. There's 7 billion people. Everyone always thinks that's a 1-1 ratio. It's not. 45% of the world's population carries a mobile phone, which means the growth we're going to see in the next 5 years is going to be exactly in these restricted areas. Everyone's going to grab a mobile device. And what he said in that chapter is, once these people come on the internet, the next 2 or 3 billion, they're not suddenly going to have better paying jobs. unlimited data, clean water. They're not going to have everything. But the thing he said that they will have immediate is access to education. And they will find a way. So for us, it's again, what's the most cost-effective way to do that? And it's the mobile networks.
But the things you've learned could be real important for us to learn. I mean, it's sort of more people need to know about the digital promise. More people need to know what's happening with net neutrality. More people need to know about ubiquitous access for the network, whether it be in a school or
Was it
home.
LAUSD? There was a recent story a couple days ago that said that they've now, very large districts now allowing mobile devices, phones.
New York City.
Was it?
BYOD?
New York City, that's right. And
BYOD.
it's
Which is
so
huge.
interesting because there's still so many schools, districts that tell the kids, to power down when they come in. I mean, they've got this great device, and unfortunately, there's a lot of distrust, and some of it is warranted. My daughter's in high school, and so she knows what some of the kids would do. But again, it goes back to effective teaching and engagement.
Right.
If the students are engaged and the learning environment is strong, the kids are less likely to be texting or less likely to be doing something else. I mean, if I had a cell phone or a mobile device in high school, I probably would have been a lot more entertained than I was. But so it all boils down. Same thing with even giving iPads out. Doesn't mean that they're going to go right to learning. So you have to really construct it in a way that that the students have purpose in using it. When they're not using it, you have strategies to enable it so that they're not distracted by it. But I think you have to come up with a way that they can allow them to use their phones, because that's the #1 platform worldwide.
Yep.
I can do almost anything on here, and my daughter can do almost anything. I know a lot of teachers that know that they can get email on here, and so they just assume that you can't do anything on it, based on their experience. And so I think it needs to become more of a public awareness piece, not just for the teachers, but for parents, for everybody.
But you also have to, I have to emphasize, we have to get out of this conversation about control. It absolutely is done.
It's a
Because as he just pointed out, it's a competitive need. So I spoke in Medellin, Colombia a year and a half ago in June at an education conference called Virtual Educa. And 10,000 educators there, paying their own way, 10,000. President of the country speaks. It's like, literally, it was nonstop. My thing was thousands of people, and these were all teachers, and they were hungry. And in Colombia now, they spend more on education than they do on the military. 55% of fifth graders are on computer during the day. So if we want to stay in a leading way, these conversations about controlling and can they bring a device, can they not bring a device, maybe they're going to look at something or they're going to text their friend in the afternoon, it's like, those need to be done, because we're in a race for global competitiveness, and other countries are taking the attitude, you can't approach it with fear and opportunity. You have to choose, and that's it.
A nameless school district near where I live, we were doing research on policy. The school was trying to decide whether they should allow mobile phones in the high school. And when we did the interviews with the students, they said, don't tell them, we already have.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. On that note, let's open it up for some questions in the audience. And there's a microphone and a gentleman in red.
All right, here you go. You've had a lot of questions today. I'm being generous.
And I'm just wondering, how come nobody's mentioned public libraries? Because that is the place where people can get Wi-Fi access. They're the ones that actually, there was a conference that was sponsored by IREX and Gates called BeyondAccess.net, which showed, mostly in developing countries, how public libraries power development and, engage with the communities and their community needs. You have the Grammian Foundation that has produced a lot of mobile, things for developing countries. I think people don't think of public libraries as a place, not only for after-school students, but also a place for global learning,
So internationally, they're not a factor. The State Department wanted to do some English language learning, and they were putting it through the embassies because there's not public libraries, even in all the places, the embassies. So international for libraries, certain places like Europe maybe, but developing nations, no. Yeah, I mean, they were not wide enough. But the challenge that happened in the libraries, we have a partner who put in a digital learning solution in the library specifically with that the student can go and use it in the library. And the whole thing failed. And the reason they think it failed, now I don't have all of the data, is because you're trying to move to personalized learning and you're in an environment where it's so used, it didn't feel personal. They weren't coming every day, they weren't using it, and it didn't work. So I think it's a great opportunity. It's just using an old infrastructure for a new technology may or may not work. I think you have to embrace it.
Yeah, I
But
would also say we don't have enough libraries. Our district's something like 37 square miles, there's one library. And if you're talking about a 10-year-old who needs to get access and they live out by a strawberry field and they're 8 miles away, it's not gonna happen. But as people get older, I think libraries could be a piece.
We have partnered with libraries. So last summer, we partnered with them to provide access to students for digital curriculum access. We've trained some of the staff that do volunteer work with students on our programs. And then we have a project now where they have digital library books. And so now we're working with, a couple of our classes are actually checking out the digital books. Unfortunately, they only buy 1 or 2 copies of it, and so it's not a scalable solution. But our libraries become engaged with us because it's a community resource that we find to be important, and it provides things for certain students. Again, geography plays a big part in it, but they also have some digital resources that kids can access away from the library.
Our library's been great with parent training. That's been, and they've been wonderful partners. They've helped us out. So there's a role, I think, but I don't think they fill all the gaps.
And another question in the back?
Well, I want to thank everybody for a fantastic session. It was very enriching for me personally. I had a question regarding sustainability models for each one of your projects. For example, the project internationally, many of the areas you mentioned are resource poor. What makes financial sense for you to continue engaging, or the counties and the cities that Dr. Vodicka is engaged in? What makes it sustainable beyond the grant that's been given? Or for Verizon, what is the value proposition that engaging in this sector brings to Verizon itself, and why does this continue happening? And I think I understand yours is probably profit-driven, but if you can comment on that too.
So there's different funding models, and we can talk about
Do you want to go first?
we're a for-profit company. Our goal is profitability. Our mission is to spread digital education. So we do everything we can to use digital tools to lower the price. So I'll give you an example. A month of urban English in many countries is $3 to $5. Not a week, that's a month. And so we price it. We basically price it based on the country, and we use the country's average revenue per user to give us a benchmark, and then our partners. And we're doing the same thing with some other digital tools like our Writing Planet, where it's priced, we have a benchmark of what we need, but we, again, do it in different prices because the economies are driven. We tend to believe that education is a worldwide right, and so our goal is to how do we use digital to lower that price as aggressively as possible. But off of the shores, it's mostly not free. It is a reverse. It's mostly self-funded, parents-funded private schools. The governments can't afford it, so you have to balance it, and that's how we try to balance it. We're still working every way we can. Good.
It's a great question, and I think those of us that have been in education have seen too many times an infusion of grant money or donation, and there is no sustainability plan, and then you have obsolete equipment, and so I think the new reality for schools is we need to think about these kinds of projects as just like, water or electricity at the schools. There needs to just be a line item every year for this kind of approach, and we've been able to do that in our district and some others as well. But I think there's an interesting project we're working on with Digital Promise, thinking about, what are the innovative ways to develop funding streams that just set this as a kind of a baseline. So you could look at a state like Maine. They have a very small surcharge on their phone bills, and they've been doing a one-to-one initiative for 12 years. Every kid across the whole state, it's been highly sustainable. And when I asked someone from Maine, how the community felt about it, he said most people have no idea what the different taxes are on their bills are, their phone bill in particular, and so it's just kind of become the norm. But I've asked the question in some settings, if schools are now expected to provide IT support and networks and devices and professional development, digital curriculum and all these things, what are we letting go of? Because the funding generally isn't that much more than it was. In fact, in California, we're still behind where we were 6 years ago. So I think we have to rethink the general structure of school funding models, and then at a local level, we need to think about technology and connectivity as just a non-negotiable. And I think Mike said it smartly. Once you cross that line, you can't go back. It's just unfathomable.
And Verizon's been very interested in sustainability with its projects. How does it look
Absolutely.
at this?
So we're not the only ones to do this project. Lead the Way does the same thing. We ask that our grantees or our partner schools have some skin in the game. So in our cases, we cost shared the coach that's inside of the school. The district's paying for half, our grant's paying for the other half. We ask that they do a lot. The coaches. Digital Promise delivers the first professional development, but very quickly the coach takes over as the lead professional developer inside of the school, and they're being mentored by Digital Promise on the back end. That happens in a lot of our programs so that it becomes important and sustainable inside of the school, and the school sees a knowledge base, of Vanguard teachers, whatever it might be, where they can go to one another instead of, like you said before, oh, the consultant's not coming back for 3 more months. I guess I won't do anything for 3 months. We really try to build it as quickly as possible in that leadership inside of the school. And then you ask something along the lines of like, what's our long-term kind of goals? Certainly our long-term goals are for students to see themselves as capable and successful. I know in one of the Vista schools I visited last month, a student who had not a great discipline record, not a great academic record, one of the teachers said he had completely turned around. He was using the 5 minutes he was waiting for his parents or his ride to pick him up after school to actually do work. He was sitting on the sidewalk outside of Rancho Minerva back against the building, and he was working because it was all right there. And again, not the student that you would typically think of, oh, of course you're going to use every 5 minutes, but it was all right there. He wasn't lugging 15 books home with him, and this whatever social stigma, these are middle school students, the social stigma of like carrying all your work home, it's much cooler to walk home with a pencil, if that, right? But you're carrying one tablet, no one knows what you're doing with it. One of the other students you mentioned when we first talked was, he asked her, and I'm sorry, I'm using your story, but he asked her what she likes about having the tablets. She's an English language learner, and she doesn't have to make a scene about the fact that she doesn't understand an English word or how to translate what's her native language into English. She looks it up quickly on an app on her device, and it's a non-issue. And it doesn't create any sort of a social stigma. She feels confident. So it's that creating students who are confident, who see themselves as capable, and those students become the future innovators who improve, Verizon's capabilities ultimately. But we want to create really capable, creative, confident students.
Well, it's fairly clear from the panel that we have here, if there's any group that's going to do that, creating confident students, the team is going to do it. As a college professor, I learned one thing you don't want to do is stand between people and lunch.
Can I add one thing?
Well, you got one more thing.
And between people and lunch.
We're just going to do one quick down the row, and then we're going to break for lunch.
So one thing about cost sustainability is you have to remember that we pay a lot of money for reproducibles at school every year. We pay a lot of money for paper. The textbooks come every 5 years or so. There's money. It's reallocating it. So instead of buying the workbooks, we're paying subscriptions for math programs and using almost the same money for that. So it's a matter of reallocating your money where it is, and hopefully the states will come in when we on a next textbook adoption and realize that the device is part of the package and helps subsidize.
That's good. So thank our crew up here.
Thank you all. Thank you, John.